Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk in depth about one of the most serious and complex moments in Eastern European politics, the Belarus power crisis, and how senior military generals have moved to the center of this unfolding struggle. This is not just a political story, it is a story of power, loyalty, fear, and the future direction of an entire nation caught between internal pressure and external influence. Belarus has long been known as one of Europe's most tightly controlled states. For decades, power has been centralized around a single leadership structure, with institutions designed to protect stability rather than encourage political competition. However, when economic pressure, public dissatisfaction, and elite divisions combine, even the strongest systems begin to show cracks. The current crisis reflects exactly that kind of pressure building from multiple directions at once. At the heart of this crisis is a growing imbalance between civilian authority and military influence. As political legitimacy weakens, the role of generals becomes more visible and more decisive. Historically, the Belarusian military was kept firmly under political control, trained to defend the state rather than shape its direction. But during periods of uncertainty, the same institutions designed to protect order can become power brokers themselves. The roots of the power crisis lie in years of economic stagnation. Belarus relied heavily on state-owned industries, subsidies, and external support, particularly cheap energy and trade advantages. Over time, this model struggled to keep pace with modern economic realities. Inflation, low wages, and limited opportunities created frustration among ordinary citizens, especially younger generations who could compare their lives with neighboring countries. Public protests in previous years revealed the depth of dissatisfaction. Although those demonstrations were suppressed, they left a lasting impact. Trust between the population and the leadership eroded. When people feel their voices no longer matter, stability becomes fragile, even if it appears strong on the surface. Silence does not always mean acceptance. Sometimes it means fear or exhaustion. As civilian institutions weakened, the leadership increasingly depended on security forces to maintain control. Police, intelligence services, and the military were given expanded authority. This reliance shifted the balance of power internally. Generals and senior officers gained not just operational responsibility but political leverage as well. Their loyalty became essential for the survival of the system. In many political systems, the military is expected to remain neutral, serving the constitution rather than individuals. In Belarus, the situation is more complicated. Loyalty has traditionally been personal and institutional at the same time. When a crisis emerges, generals are forced to make choices that go beyond professional duty. These choices can define the future of the state. Reports and analysis suggest that divisions have appeared within the elite. Not all generals view the crisis in the same way. Some believe strict control is necessary to prevent chaos and foreign interference. Others quietly worry that continued repression will push the country toward isolation, economic collapse, or even internal conflict. These internal debates rarely become public, but their consequences can be enormous. The phrase "generals lead" does not always mean tanks on the streets or an open coup. In many cases, leadership by generals happens behind closed doors. It appears in advisory roles, emergency councils, and security-driven decision-making. Policies start to reflect military logic rather than political compromise. Stability is defined as control, not consent. The power crisis also has a strong international dimension. Belarus sits at a strategic crossroads between Russia and the European Union. Any shift in power immediately attracts attention from both sides. Military leaders understand this reality better than most politicians because they are trained to think in terms of security, alliances, and threats. For Russia, Belarus is a critical partner and buffer state. Military cooperation, joint exercises, and shared infrastructure tie the two countries closely together. In times of crisis, Belarusian generals must consider how their actions will be interpreted in Moscow. Support, pressure, or intervention are all possibilities that weigh heavily on decision makers. At the same time, Western countries closely monitor the situation. Sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and international criticism have already affected Belarus. Generals know that deeper involvement in politics could further damage the country's international standing. However, they may also believe that maintaining order at home is more important than global approval. The crisis raises an important question about legitimacy. Who truly governs when civilian authority is weakened and military influence grows? Is it the elected leadership, the security apparatus, or a collective system where power is shared but accountability is unclear? When responsibility becomes blurred, mistakes become more likely and harder to correct. Another key factor is the morale within the armed forces themselves. Soldiers and junior officers are also citizens. They experience the same economic difficulties and social pressures as the rest of the population. If orders conflict with personal beliefs or family interests, loyalty can become strained. Generals must manage not only external threats, but internal cohesion as well. History offers many examples of what can happen when militaries become deeply involved in politics. In some cases, they restore order temporarily but fail to solve underlying problems. In others, they become entrenched, leading to long-term authoritarian rule. The Belarus situation has elements of both possibilities, making its outcome difficult to predict. Information control plays a major role in this crisis. State media emphasizes stability, unity, and external threats. Independent voices are limited. Generals understand the power of narrative. Controlling information can be as important as controlling territory. However, in the age of digital communication, complete control is nearly impossible. Social media and alternative news sources continue to shape public perception, even under heavy restrictions. Rumors, leaks, and unofficial statements can spread quickly. This environment creates uncertainty, which can either pressure leaders toward reform or push them to rely even more heavily on force and secrecy. The economic dimension cannot be ignored. Military-led decision-making often prioritizes security over economic reform. Yet without economic recovery, stability remains temporary, investors hesitate, industries decline, and dependence on external support increases. Generals may understand this intellectually, but their training does not focus on economic management. The power crisis also affects national identity. Belarus has long struggled to define itself independently while balancing historical ties. When generals step into leadership roles, national identity can become more militarized. Unity is framed around defense and resistance rather than civic participation and cultural expression. One of the most dangerous risks in such a crisis is miscalculation. A single decision, protest, or external incident could escalate tensions rapidly. When military leaders are involved, escalation can happen faster because responses are designed to be decisive rather than flexible. This increases the stakes for everyone involved. There is also the human cost. Ordinary people live with uncertainty, fear, and limited opportunities. Families worry about the future of their children. Young people consider leaving the country. Professionals face restrictions and surveillance. The power struggle at the top directly affects daily life at the bottom. Despite the bleak picture, crises also create moments of choice. Generals, politicians, and civil society actors all face decisions that can lead toward dialogue or deeper confrontation. Even within rigid systems, individuals matter. Personal beliefs, ethics, and long-term vision can influence outcomes more than official positions. Some analysts believe that generals leading during a crisis can eventually open the door to controlled reforms. They argue that military leaders may push for stability through gradual change rather than endless repression. Others are more skeptical, warning that once the military becomes politically dominant, it rarely steps back willingly. The future of Belarus depends on whether power can be rebalanced. Civilian institutions need legitimacy, transparency, and public trust. Without these, reliance on generals will continue. But rebuilding trust requires difficult conversations, compromises, and accountability, all of which are risky in the short term. International actors also have a role to play. Pressure without dialogue can harden positions. Support without conditions can entrench existing structures. Finding the right balance is challenging, especially when geopolitical interests are involved. The people of Belarus often feel caught between forces beyond their control. As the power crisis unfolds, one thing is clear: this is not just a temporary political drama, it is a turning point that will shape Belarus for years, possibly decades. Whether generals remain behind the scenes or move further into leadership will influence the country's path towards stability or stagnation. Understanding this crisis requires looking beyond headlines. It requires examining economic realities, institutional structures, historical experiences, and human motivations. Simplistic explanations miss the deeper dynamics at work. The role of generals is not just about power, but about how a state responds when its traditional systems no longer function as expected. In the end, the Belarus power crisis is a reminder that stability built only on control is fragile. True stability comes from legitimacy, participation, and adaptability. Whether the current leadership, including its military figures, recognizes this truth will determine how the story ends. Thank you for staying with this detailed explanation. This situation continues to evolve, and its consequences will reach far beyond Belarus itself. We will keep watching closely, because moments like these often redefine not just a country, but an entire region.